Hi, Zachary.
Hey, Donna.
Hi there. We got a crowd, I think, today.
Right? How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Great. Well, we got 6 so far. Very good. 7. There's Melissa. There's Lisa. I got Zachary, Nikki, Sarah. We'll wait a minute or two. And Anthony. Anthony,
Hello.
weren't you the one that wrote an offer over the weekend? Anthony, did you write an offer over the weekend? He doesn't listen. Can't hear me. Anthony, did you write an offer over the weekend?
Hi, sorry, I was getting a phone call, so I'm driving right now in my car, so it disconnected. I did write an offer.
Did it get accepted?
So no, so she came back with a counter offer yesterday, and then I asked her if her sellers would accept the counter that we would go on at, and she texted me probably about 30 minutes ago saying no, they wouldn't. So
Okay. Well,
Yep.
then that's not the house for your client. So there you go.
yeah, and my buyer already told me to reach out to another listing agent that he wants to go see a property. So
Okay, there you
everything
go.
happens for a reason.
Everything happens for a reason. Trust me, it does.
Yep.
Okay, so we have Zachary, we've got Anthony, we've got Sarah, Nikki, Melissa, Lisa, and Thomas. So we're all set. So let me go into where I have to share. So hold on just a minute here. Oh, hang on just a minute. I got to get to the right screen. All right, where are you? Okay. So let me get to the right screen here. Can everyone see that? Thumbs up, thumbs up. Okay, good. And anytime I'm going through this, because I can't see everybody, so if you have a question, just go ahead and butt in because I only get 3 at a time, people that I'm seeing here. So this is the first thing that we want to look at. This is the documents that go into command. And this is the buyer disclosure or definitions of working relationship. I didn't put that on that line, but either one is fine. Basically, the first one's kind of a little bit different, but the second one is just definitions and you can tell them how you're going to represent them. Then we have a buyer agency agreement. We have buyer advisory that comes from our in-house attorney. It's about 6 pages long. And then if you're going to change from a buyer's agent to a transaction broker, you're going to have to use a document called change of status. I would be very careful about changing your status because it's real hard to remain neutral in a transaction. So now we go under contract. You have a lender letter you need to upload, a printout sheet for under contract. We have the realist information on the seller, a counter, maybe, maybe not, copy of the earnest money check and receipt. You have inspection objection resolution. We have seller's property disclosure, square foot disclosure, any and all amend extends. These come from the other agent. You may or may not have a source of water addendum because many agents are lazy and just say it's in the seller's property disclosure. But it's a requirement when you list in our office that you have it, because that way the buyer knows for sure where the water is. Closing instructions you may or may not get. About, I would say 65% of the agents use them, many don't. They want to rely on the title company, but our closing instructions and the title closing instructions are not the same. So if you do have closing instructions and it's signed by all parties, please remind the title company we're not using their closing instructions. Then if you have a lead-based paint house, which was built before January 1st, 1978, you have to have the lead-based paint disclosure. All parties sign it. And if you don't sign it, it's an $18,000 fine. And every year it goes up by the cost of living. There may or may not be a post-closing occupancy if the seller is not vacating the premises on the day of closing. Rarely do we use a promissory note for earnest money, but every once in a great while it might, but it's very rare. Commission agreement on a for sale by owner or a new construction should be uploaded. Otherwise, it goes through command. Short sale addendum you aren't going to use right now, but come next year, we might get a few more of those. Then you go to command and you go to, once all that's uploaded, and then you go to commission request and fill out all of that. Then all documents after closing, you get it via email from the title company, and your copies of your check or distribution sheet. Upload a sold sheet, MLS sold sheet. And then I would also just tell you at the bottom of your command just to make copies of any repairs or inspections, reports, and those kinds of things. That way you have everything in one file and you can always go back and get them, okay? So now, the first document have is definitions of working relationship. Got to remember it's a disclosure and it's not a document, but you want to make sure everybody understands it. Excuse me, understands it and receipts for it and how you're going to get it to them. Kind of fill it out exactly as you see here. Then you have, now the next document is your buyer agency. Always check your buyer agency. I'm a buyer's agent. I have a date. I have multiple person firm. You always check that. Now we have the buyer. You want to ask the buyer for their legal name. The reason you want the legal name is that it will transfer to a contract after when you start your process. It will automatically populate, and when you put your offer in, that way you've got their legal names already set up. When you set up CTME or DocuSign, Keller Williams Real Estate LLC, and your name will automatically populate. 3.4, always put this down the way it is. Buyer's next principal resident, whether from MLS multi-listing service for sale by owner, for FSBO for sale by owner. You can put investment properties, land, or new home builder, either one, any of those. That way you've covered the whole gamut of what you need to put in your agreement. Now on 3.6, you've got a beginning and ending date for your contracts. And you always want to put that at least 6 to 8 months out. With the way things are going now, I would tell you minimum of 6 months, because they may find a house that may fall through on inspection. You may write it several times and get it before you get it through with a seller. Then on our 3.8.2 is, will it fall in a holiday or after a holiday or extended dates? So usually you'd like to say will, because that will save you a lot of time and aggravation. Paragraph 4 is 4.3.1.2. You always check this one. You always represent a buyer as a buyer's agent, okay? Unless you're going to change to a transaction broker, which again is very rare. Then on 5, these are your brokerage duties. Please read through. understand them. You don't have to memorize them, but you surely want to be able to understand what it is you are to do, okay? So now on paragraph 6, when you check the box at the top, you have 3 additional duties. You have, if you're going to get fired, these are usually the 3 additional duties that you're going to get fired on. And 6.1, 2, and 3, it's promote the interest of the buyer, terms and conditions, and counseling the buyer on any material items or risk on this deal. Normally, if you're going to get fired, this is the 3 you're going to get fired on. It's rare that you are fired by a buyer, but if you got to remember, you're in the service business, so you do have to give them service. You have to give them explanations. You have to be sure they're comfortable with it and make sure that they understand. And you want to be sure that you sit down and go over these documents with them before you go out to find a house, okay? What kind of compensation do you are going to get? 7.1.1. One is I'm getting at least 2%. You can say 3, whatever you want in here is fine. Any bonus or any greater commission shall be paid to Keller Williams Real Estate LLC at the time of closing. And that's in case somebody's giving away a $2,000 bonus from a builder or a seller or whatever. Now, if you get less than 2.8, it's your decision to ask your buyers to pay the difference. I've never done it. I don't feel comfortable asking for it. And most of the time it is what it is advertised in the MLS, but that's totally up to how you want to handle your business. Now, go all the way down to 7.1.4, other compensations. We don't have any at this time, so be specific. No, not at this time, okay? So now we go down to 7.2.4, and if you're going to get a lease payment, which we don't, but you could, you get at the time of closing, at the time of the lease. So then we go into that 7.3.1, the listing brokerage or seller may pay, buyer is obligated to pay. I've never collected on this either, but always check it, make sure everybody stays pretty honest and not veer off somewhere, okay? 7.4 is the holdover clause. You can put anywhere from 30 to 120 days, whatever you want is fine. You always be sure to keep everything you've shown a buyer. So until you've closed on a deal, all your whatever properties you've shown them in case they blow you up and go back behind your back. And you will collect. 8 is pretty self-explanatory. 9 is I'm not working with the broker and I haven't received any list that the previous broker gave me, okay? So this is where if they go off the reservation, you got to sue to get paid, but when we get to that, I haven't had too many of those problems, so only years and years ago. So again, 11 is pretty self-explanatory. 12 is the brokerage service, anything additional, none at this time. 12.2 says you're going to follow the instructions from the MLS. And what area are you serving? So this could be, I'm serving the Metro Denver area. I'm serving Colorado Springs. I'm serving Fort Collins, anything in Iris. So these are different. We have different MLS systems, Iris, RE Colorado, and PPAR. And so those are 3 different MLS systems. So you might be showing somebody from all the way up from Fort Collins down to Colorado Springs. If you aren't, put it in here. Most of the time, I'd only stay within the Metro District, but that's what you want. If you go to the mountains, you have to remember, you have to be competent in what their areas are up there and be very cautious about selling. Your best bet is to refer it out to our KW offices in Vail or Frisco. Then we're let's see, 14 all the way through 20, again, are pretty self-explanatory. You want to say, hey, listen, if you want to take this contract to an attorney, that's fine. Basically, what's here is here, okay? You don't usually change too much. And additional provisions, I don't usually put too many things in there, but you might put in there that you have a transaction coordinator, her name is blah, blah, blah. Here's the phone number. She'll be handing all the paperwork once we go under contract and who's paying for it. Then what's attached to this first email? It's going to be buyer advisory and definitions of working relationship attaches to this buyer agency agreement. So your first email, as we go through, I'll tell you what level of emails you give your buyers. 23 all the way down to 28, again, are pretty self-explanatory. Your buyer signs, your signature should already be on there, and everything that's pertinent should be there. The next document comes from our in-house attorney, and we want to make sure that the buyers understand. Hey, listen, you want to review the contracts. You want to have, there could be earnest money disputes. There could be wire fraud. You're entitled to inspection. You might want to measure the square feet. You want to, if there's a septic tank, you get a usage permit. Water sources, what is that? Inspections, you can have any kind you want. You can have a survey, what happens to short sales, what happens with home inspections and home HOA documents, special taxing. It's all the way down, and it's 6 pages long. So then your buyer sign and you sign. So you have the first email when you're talking to your buyer. Here are the documents you have. You have your definitions of working relationship. You've got your buyer a document to say I'm representing you as a buyer agent. And your third one is your buyer advisory. As when you sit down and talk to a buyer, hopefully it would be in the office or someplace that you can go through these things. Then you send them the email, and then you have them sign it. So that way you can go and look. I would not suggest, although it happens, I want to go buy a house. Great. Now, what I would like for you to do, the first house you could show them and you're not under agency agreement. After that first house, you want to say, listen, we need to sign our buyer document so I can represent you as a buyer agent, okay? And I wouldn't go much past 1, maybe 2, but then you are more apt not to be able to get those people as buyers. So you want to be sure that you get these 3 documents signed as soon as you had your buyer consultation. Now we're going on. We found a house. We're going to buy a property. We have put our date in here. We already have their legal names for the buyers that we did. We have joint tenants, tenants in common, or others. Joint tenant is right of survivorship. When my husband passed away, I got all the assets because everything in our world were joint tenants. Tenants in common are usually used for when it's maybe a second marriage, or they have 50-50 or 60-40. Somebody's putting in money and nobody, they're not married, okay? Others are severalty or single person. So you have to ask them what they want and be sure that they understand. So you explain it the way I just did. Now we have the seller's name from the realist document that we printed off, or we got when we put together the seller's documents. We have the county they're in, we have the legal description, we have all of that in and inserted in there. Now, what's included comes with the MLS information. If there's 3-car garage, 2-car garage, whatever it is, be specific on your remote controls. Is there solar panel? If there's nothing here, then leave those blank. Now we go to other inclusions. So be sure you list the freestanding gas stove, the refrigerator located in the kitchen, the ice maker in the basement, whatever or wherever those appliances are, be sure to list them. Microwave, whatever, even though it's built in, put it in here. And if there's if there's drapery and blinds to be left, then say that. If there are, let's see, shutters, then list that. The more specific you are, the less things have a tendency to walk out the door, okay? Now, do I have any other encumbrances? No, because the solar is owned, it's not leased. So if it was leased on 2.5.4, we would put down Buyer has the right to review the leases and decide if they're going to assume that lease. But in this case, I said, no, there's not any leases involved. It's owned outright. Now we're going to parking facilities, 2.5.6. I know it's a 3-car garage because I can see that in the picture. And I know there's a shed in the backyard that will go with the property. Now, if you're dealing with a condo or townhome, you have to be sure to ask the question. That's why I have you fill out this the way I do, to acknowledge that, hey, Mr. Listing Agent, is there any parking? Is it reserved? Do they have a storage bin in the underground parking space in front of their car? What number would that be? Oh, it's on the 2nd floor rather than the floor the unit's on. So everybody, you got to ask questions to be sure that you get your buyers what they are entitled to. Now, lease. Okay, we're not going to take any lease. The solar is leased for solar panels that are currently installed on the property. It's already, the lease is gone and everything's good. So in case you do have a lease item, you fill it in this paragraph 2.5.7. Now, what's excluded? Okay, you could put buyer seller's personal property, which I think is rather silly, but there you go. 2.6. You can put washer dryer located. Where's it located? In a very large house, there could be 2 washers and 2 dryers. Maybe they're keeping one and maybe they're taking one. It's hard to say. So you want to be specific on what stays and what goes. Even when you list a property, be specific, okay? So now there's no water rights. So on 2.7, basically all of this is none, okay? Now we get down here to 2.7.6 where it says water review. We don't have any because there's nothing that conveys with the house. If you're in lots, say Elizabeth, Albert, Dalbert County, this could apply to, yes, there might be a review. And you must keep in mind a water right attorney's review takes anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks to review. So you have to write your contract accordingly. Next week, we will deal with dates and deadlines. Now we go down to 3.3.3. These are deadlines. Will it go and be extended or not extended? Will or will not? It's up to you guys. So now we have price point of $450. $450, MLS tells us that there's $5,000 earnest money. The lender letter will tell you how much they're putting down and what their new loan might be. And what they're going to be bringing at closing is the difference. So these 2 columns have to add up. Now on 4.2, in this case, there's no seller concession. So we're not asking Mr. Seller to pay for anything, but I'm seeing more and more contracts come through where they're giving them full price and asking for $5,000 or $3,000 in closing costs or prepays. So it's whatever works for you and your buyer. Who's got the earnest money? Is it the agency? Is it the title company? But it can be given in a form of a personal check. You don't need a certified check. It's a personal check to Land Title, to Remax Alliance, whatever it is, okay? Then we go down, it tells you what happens if you don't give it and if there's a dispute. So we go all the way down to new loans. Now we're going for a conventional loan. And if you're going to do FHA or VA, only check one of these 3. You don't be checking all of them, just check one, okay? Then you can go on CTME on 4.6 and 4.7, and there's a little box to the left of these numbers where you can click them and they shrink up and they won't take up a lot of your time here when you're printing. If you do printing, it won't. You don't have to do it because it doesn't. It shortens all the paragraphs up. Now 5, you're dealing with your new loan application. We'll talk about that next week. Now we have new loan terms and we have new loan availability. Those 3 are time sensitive and you have to be sure you understand what they mean so you don't cause your buyers to lose their earnest money. Number 6 is dealing with the appraisal. So the first one you're dealing with is conventional. The conventional appraisal is here it is, you're going to get it, and you have a deadline and you have an objection. So you have to be careful and make sure your dates are appropriately done. And if you have an objection, how do you resolve? Okay. On a conventional loan, you usually end up negotiating if it doesn't come out to be the, it doesn't meet the agreed upon selling price. FHA and VA tell the buyers that they don't have to go forth with the contract if the agreed upon selling price is not acceptable to them. They can walk away. Most in reality happens is there's trying to work out a deal to where everybody adjusts the price accordingly. But an FHA and VA buyer do not have to take the deal if it doesn't appraise. And on 6.4, who's paying for it? So we want to be sure that we know who's paying for it. 7 is dealing with all of the HOA docs and common interest community disclosures. Anything in 7 comes from the listing agent. And if there's an HOA, if there's no HOA, that's not important. Okay, paragraph 8 is dealing with title. If I represent the buyer, then I always check 8.11. If you represent a buyer who wants to select the title company, 8.12, then what happens is that adds about anywhere from $1,800 to $2,200 onto a buyer's cost, because they will select, but they also pay. So your best bet is to go ahead and check the first one. That way it's not as expensive for your buyer. On 8.1.3, this is always checked will. No but, ands, ifs, or buts about it. It's always will. This means that they run a search on just before the day before, the day of, and the day after closings to make sure nobody put a lien on their property. Then you always want to make who's going to pay for it. I always put seller. It's only about $35, guys. So now the rest of 8 deals with title. We rarely have abstracts, which usually will come from Denver, but most of the time it won't. You're fine that it won't. You usually get a title commitment. Rest of it is your recording off matters, your off record recording. If there's something the buyer doesn't like, that means they can go and research it. They don't like it, they can object and get out of the contract. 8 telling you about special taxing district that almost every area has. 8.5, and you check seller. And that means that the title commitment and the tax certificate has to come at the same time. The only time we have a problem with that is going to be when it's the early part of January, February. So now on 8.7.1 is title objection. There was something in the title you're objecting to. Could be is that IRS lien going to be paid off? Is the name, something in that title that cause it won't close. So you try real hard to make sure. Most of the time, I would say 90% of the time, the title is free and clear, or it's going to be clear when they take the old loan off and put the new loan in. So you have title advisories. You don't get a whole lot of this stuff, but then on 8.8.1 is talking about there's gas and mineral rights that come with property or leases. And most of the time that only deals with Dalbert, Albert, and Douglas County, Eastern Douglas County. So now we go down to who's going to review the mineral rights. At 8.9 does or does not have the right to review those rights. Well, we don't really have any because it's a lot and block in the city, so we're good. But again, a mineral right attorney, if they are going to review this, will be anywhere from about 2 to 6 or 8 weeks. So write your contract accordingly. Number 9 is talking about surveys or new ILCs. Most of the time you don't need them. I would go ahead only on a townhome or a condo. You don't need to put dates or anything in here on paragraph 9. But if you've got a normal house, lot and block, or acreage, you need to put this information. It doesn't mean you're going to use it. It means if the title company and or the lender decides they need it, then you have it in your contract. If they need it, you don't have anything in paragraph 9, then it's going to be a problem because it's going to be a fight, and raise your hand if you're the agent, you'll end up paying for it. So an ILC or a survey, who's going to pay for it? If I represent buyers and sellers, sometimes you say buyers just to get your deal through. But bottom line is that you don't always need it. If you sell something in Adams County, or well, you could need it because there's a lot of drilling up there, and the lender and or the title company will say, I want a new ILC or I want a new survey. Surveys can go anywhere from as low as 500 up to $40,000, $50,000, depending on the acreages. And it is not a fast process. So anyway, the rest of this in 9 deals with your survey. Now we go to 10. You can have any kind of inspection you want on your this property, except, as long as you don't destroy the house. 10.2 says the property is as is, where is, and with all faults. And this way, you don't have to repeat it. It's already in the contract. I had somebody recently send me over an amend extend, putting that paragraph in there. And I said, why are we doing it? It's already in the contract. We don't need to have that as amend extend. Obviously, that person, as nice as he was, had not read that. Again, you can have any kind of inspection you want, as long as you do within your deadlines for objection, or if you want to terminate because you've had an inspection and there's 25 things that have to be done. And if you can only give an inspection termination or an objection. You give one or the other, you don't give both. Then if you give an objection, seller is going to resolve and everybody comes to an agreement. And you don't want to damage the house. On 10.5, you got to make sure the property is insurable. So you have a date for that. And you, as soon as you go under contract, you make sure your buyers touch bases with their lender, their insurance carrier, to make sure they can get insurance. Please do not assume that all houses are going to have the same kind of, or you're going to be able to get it. If you're in a floodplain or the fire zone, you're going to pay much higher premiums. And on a floodplain, you're going to have to get flood insurance, which is not cheap, and it comes through FEMA. So very expensive. So get this stuff out of the way first, clearly, in case there's a problem that you might have to cancel. Now we're talking about, this is about the lease agreement for solar, has another 15 years to lease. That's great. Then you want to put that in here so you can review all the documents. The buyer will assume the seller's obligation, and that's fine. And you have any other due diligence documents that need to be put in there. Most of the time you don't, but in case you do, go ahead and put that in there, and along with the date. So we have other documents. No, not at the time, but we might have something in there. You want to review permits for the basement that just got finished. So I like everything. I don't like everything. Again, you fall into this category of making sure you have a good inspection, and we can give you great names of people who do great jobs. 10.7, excuse me, is conditional, that I have another property to sell. It's under contract. We've gone through the appraisal and the inspection, and we're just waiting for closing. That's what you put into additional provisions, and you put the date of your closing in 10.7. Now we have to say, acknowledge a seller's property disclosure when you're putting an offer and you don't have it, and there is or isn't a well. So if there's a well, you put your well permit number in here. And lead-based paint is basically self-explanatory. You have a disclosure, you get it, and you sign it. And whether they want to do a test, sometimes people do, sometimes people don't. So on 10.11 is a carbon monoxide detector, has to be in the house when you do your walkthrough, or before you even list it, to make sure that they are one carbon monoxide detector is within 15 feet of all sleeping areas. It's a state law. We don't have a meth disclosure, but if you think you have a meth house, come see me, because we have some other issues that have to be done. So 12 is our closing. So now on 12.2, the closing instructions are or are not, they're not, because we're just starting our offer. On 12.3, the person who controls the listing is the listing agent. You don't put down what mutual agreement or anything like that. It's listing agent. Those are the people who control the time and place of closing. Now, in reality, what happens, the listing agent says, hey, where do you want to close? And how can we get X or Y or Z? What time do you want to do those things? It's usually done carefully and nicely, but he or she still controls the listing. So 12.4 and talk about 12.5 for assignments. And then 13 is always special warranty deeds. It warrants the time from the buyer through the time the buyer owns it to the time the buyer sells it. That's the only time they're going to warrant anything. General warranty deeds do not have the same warrants as they used to, which was before time, including the time the seller used it. They don't have those kind of warrants anymore. So you only check special warranty deed. So now we go down to 15. 15 is dealing with the closing costs, which you have a real estate side and you have a lender side. It's 50-50 normally. And if you on 15.3.1, if you want to make your deal great, the status lessor could be 50-50 or seller. You can have recording change fees 50-50 or seller. The working capital could be 50-50 or seller, whatever works for your buyer. Okay. On 15.3.4, other fees, 50-50 or seller, whatever you want. On 15.4, most of the time, there's no local transfer fee, but you can check seller or you can check NA. Sales tax and private transfer tax are used in the high country along with the local transfer fee. Down here, most of the time it's NAs, or you can put seller. It doesn't make any difference, whatever you want. On 15.7, you always want to check water transfer fees and make sure that your water transfer fee is $350. They do have them now. Some districts are small amounts, some districts are more. Check your box water district. Now, and who's going to pay for it, seller or buyer? On 15.8, they have utility transfer fees on some utility companies. So who's going to pay for it? Seller, buyer, or 50-50, or I wouldn't put none because there could be one and you'll end up paying it if you're the agent. On 15.9.1, if the seller is a foreign national, which you do not know, so do not check that box. Colorado withholding might come into play, as the FERPA one might come into play, and it would be collected at closing, and there are documents the seller will sign on each of those paragraphs. Now we have prorations. So we're dealing with taxes. I always put most recent levy and most recent assessment. That's the most accurate. Rents and things like that don't apply. Other prorations right now, you always want to put none at the end of the sentence. One of our agents got caught. He had it blank and the propane tank cost, because it was half full, went to him at closing to the tune of $7,000. So at this point, you want to be sure you put none at the end of that sentence. Now we go to associations. So we always want special assessments, go to seller, and you as a buyer will only take the regular associations and the word none at the end of that sentence. Very careful to look at these two paragraphs. It can cost your buyer money if you don't pay attention to them. So now we go down to 17. So if the seller's not out on time, I want to make sure it's very painful for them to be able to make sure that they get out on time. So I put $500. If there's a post-closing occupancy, because you know the buyer is not going to get out of the house on time, you check that box and you fill out the post-closing occupancy agreement document and make sure that it's filled out appropriately. You have 18, you're entitled to a walkthrough. What happens if you have a flood or something happens to the house? And then you go all the way, verify the walkthrough is only to see that the house is still physically standing as it was when you made your offer. All sellers and buyers can buy a home warranty on a piece of property. 19 through 28, I believe it is. Yep. Are really self-explanatory, read them. 29, you're putting in here, okay, I have a TC, her name is X, she'll handle all paperwork and who's paying for her. Then on 30 31.1, you put down the following. Don't leave it blank. Don't leave NAs in here. Earnest money check, water source addendum, property disclosure, closing instructions, and lead-based paint if it's applied, if it needed, otherwise you don't need it. And square foot goes into 30.2. Do not put any NAs in your contract. At the end at the very, very bottom, when you're writing an offer, first thing you put in your buyer's name and go all the way to the bottom and check the little dot that says remove. You can do the same thing in DocuSign, and then hit save. That'll take all the NAs out of the document, and everything's nice and clean. Besides that, when you put NAs in there, it will delete your paragraphs. So it's dangerous to do that. So here's the buyer's names, seller's names. Now we go to where the agents fill out their portion. So we have agent, which is you. I don't have the earnest money. I'm a buyer's agent. I'm being paid by the listing firm. All this information, and by the way, this is our company license number. Your name and signature should already be in there, and all the other information. Now you go down to B. He or she does not have the earnest money. They're as a seller's agent paid by the seller. You fill all of this in. And the reason I want you to do that is because what happens is other agents are very, very lazy. So if we fill everything in for them, the only thing they have to do is sign and date, and that's still a struggle for about 60% of them. So let's try to do our best to help them out. If you have to do an amend extend for any reason with the contract, this is the document, do it. You may change any dates or change anything or the price or whatever it is here. Everybody signs it. Now, if you think they're not going to sign the amend extend, you can do an extension or termination. And that way you fill it out accordingly. And that way, if you think they're going to extend, you put it there. If you think they're going to terminate, that would be okay too. So those two documents, post-closing occupancy is filled out this way. You've got your name, the buyer, seller, contract date, all of that. Possession date is X, whatever X is, and that would be the day so from the day of closing to the day they turn it over to the buyer. Now we go down to here. Is there going to be any rent charge? Most of the time in the past it hasn't, but I think going in the future it will be. So put something in or not, whatever your buyers want. You put the same number down here on 10 is if they fail to vacate the premises on time, it's going to be this. Water and sewer, you want to check seller because that'll be paid at closing, and gas will be, you have to switch it. So you can say seller or buyer. So it's switched to closing, water and sewer, but most of the time you can put either seller or buyer in there. That's fine. Gas and electric, I would put down buyer, seller, and then they will then change it over on the day that you're going to have possession. 13 is the most important thing. You want to make sure that they have proof of their renter's insurance prior to closing, if possible, to make sure if the house burns down, your insurance is in place if you're a buyer. If the sellers don't have it and it burns down, then it's going to create a problem along the way with the fact that the house burns down and all the content in there of the sellers is not insured. So it's imperative that they have that. You probably want to have a security deposit, which will be exchanged back to the seller at the day of exchanging the keys and GDO and the anything else. That seller will get that $2,000 back. I've only had one time where somebody didn't honor that. So anyway, and then everybody signs, or you can also put in here, see, buyer and seller shall exchange the keys and garage door open on blank day. And make sure everybody knows that that's the date you need to do it. And everybody understands that's the date the deposit check's going back, you get the keys and GDO, and everybody's happy and everybody moves forward. Be specific. The more specific you are, the less problems you're going to have. Okay, the next one, if you have a title objection, you have a document for that. And if you have an appraisal objection, you have a document for that. and you do send the appraisal along with that. Then you can, don't worry, this is double, I got double things in here. Now, if the buyer doesn't want to have an inspection, please make sure the buyer is going to you're going to have this document called buyer acknowledgement, which is in CTME and in DocuSign. This says, I'm not having an inspection, I'm not getting a home warranty, and that way nobody can come back to you and haunt you that they didn't have an opportunity to do these things. This protects you when if they choose not to have an inspection, this is the document you must have them sign, guys. It's a protection for you and for them. This is just telling you that a septic use permit, why you have to have it. If you have acreage and you have a well and septic, sellers have to pump and make sure the septic tank works properly. If you're writing an offer, make sure who's going to pay for that septic tank permit. And it has been assumed for years the seller would, but it's not really the seller's obligation. We have to say that it is seller's obligation. Now, if you're going to sell your own property, you have to do 4 things to keep your insurance intact. You have to fill out a seller's property disclosure. You have to have a home warranty put on your property for 1 year. You have to do a home inspection, and you have to use Colorado State approved forms. And you have a $2,500 deductible on your, insurance, and that makes making sure that you've got everything covered. And if they cover you for your, insurance, then your deductible max is $2,500 most of the time. If you have a well on your property, this is just an extended checklist to give to a buyer. Notice to terminate if something happens, you don't like it, they do the inspection, they're going to bail. Here's the document you use. And that's it, guys. Who has a question? Anybody?
I have a quick question, Donna.
Sure, Lisa.
Is there anywhere that we can have like averages of a lot of those costs, all those different closing costs?
Well,
Is
the
there
closing,
any-
well, you could ask Patrick. Basically, I always figure 2%, 2.5% on closing costs, Lisa. I do that because, so if I've got a loan of $100,000, let's say 300,000, and I do 2%, it's 6,000. Okay. So most of the time, the closing costs vary between, say, $5,000 to $10,000 in that range. But their best bet is before you go take them out, that they're going to talk to the lender and get that information up front. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but there's nowhere that lists like all of those kind of little nitty gritty,
You might be able
transfer
to get it. You might be able to get it from one of the lenders or even
Okay.
a title company. You can ask the
Okay.
title company, but I always figure it on a percentage basis. And it's pretty close. It's pretty close.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Anybody else got another question?
I do.
Okay, Mr. Zachary, what you got?
This is not a silly question. I remember I said that
No
last
silly question.
time. For the seller's renter's insurance policy, would you just contact the seller's agent and ask if they have the policy? No.
You don't contact anybody. The seller does, and then you ask the seller to have the agent send a binder to the title company, a proof that they have the insurance. Okay. So
Okay.
it goes through the title company, not you.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. What else? Who else has got a question?
Bernadette,
Yep, Miss Bernadette.
yeah, but it's kind of personal,
Okay,
and I just want to. I have a client that wants to come to the office.
okay.
So what do I tell them? Yes or no?
Well, yeah, you can meet your client here and call and reserve one of the conference rooms. And you can sit down and talk to him in one of the he or she, in one of the conference rooms. And just call the front desk, call the office, and Jessica will answer the phone. And
Okay.
she can book in whatever, it's, let you know when it's available and two, what time you want it, okay? And yes, meet them at the office, absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else got another question?
Donna, I have one more question for you.
Sure, Zach.
So last week we went over the seller's agency, and the first email and the second email basically go together, but they're two separate emails.
Yeah.
The first email for the for buyer representation is obviously the definitions of working relationships, the buyer advisory, and then
The document itself.
then the document itself. Is there a second email that also goes along? Okay, so
No,
just one.
not for the buyer. Just,
Okay.
there are 3 for the email, for the seller, but only 1 for the buyer.
Okay.
And the
perfect.
third, actually, a second one would be the buy-sell contract itself.
Okay.
Okay,
Awesome.
makes sense?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else
Thank
got a question?
Mm,
Okay, well, listen, you guys have a great day.
Thank you.
And try to stay out of the rain, and I'll see you guys next week for dates and deadlines.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Thank you so
Donna.
much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.